guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new Just Know HOA content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, "It Sounds Like Sonia Should Be in the Looney Bin." My very first place in college that I didn't rent was a townhouse condo. It was your typical cookie-cutter, 3-storied, 4 to a section, little cut out of suburbia for beginners. I lived near the back of the development, which meant driving by past the front units every day to get to and from work and school. Our Homeowners Association Board President, Sonia, lived across the street from our elderly HOA treasurer, Zelda. Sonia was in her 30s and ran an illegal daycare out of her home, and I hated driving by her house after 3 p.m. or on weekends because her 2 elementary-aged kids would hide behind parked cars and run in front of your vehicle screaming, "Slow down." I got really scared after that happened a few times and only drove 5 mph through there, but the little twerps kept doing it. I spoke with their mom about how unsafe jumping in front of cars was. I was driving very slow because I was terrified, and they were basically harassing me and our neighbors weekly. But Sonia said her kids were being neighborhood monitors, so I should be thankful for their diligence. What the heck? A week later, around 7 p.m., after most of the residents were home, mostly young families, I pulled in after work and noticed a tow truck on the street. Then 2. Then 3. Holy poop, they were towing everyone in the neighborhood. I parked in my garage and ran upstairs to tell my roommates to move their cars from the street. They ran out and sure enough, everyone who parked on the street was getting towed. 2 of my neighbors were fighting with the tow truck drivers, saying that they've always parked there because it's a parking area, which is indicated in our homeowner's booklet. We whipped it out, but the tow truck drivers said they're just following the orders of Sonia, and then left when the police showed up. Apparently, Sonia had put up home printed paper signs and signed a contract with the tow company in the middle of the day without telling anyone. That night she went out into the street with a bucket of red paint and painted the curbs. Then she had the tow company post their tow signs and no parking signs the next afternoon, eliminating street parking. After that, anyone who didn't fit in their garage had to park 3 blocks away, outside the condo units. The next straw was when 4 large evergreen trees were cut down from a communal park in the development. Zelda the treasurer found out that Sonia had paid her sideman arborist over $8,000 of HOA money to cut the trees down without any discussion or approval from the HOA board. Zelda flipped her lid and let everyone know what happened to the trees at the next HOA meeting, including how Sonia had used the funds intended for our community co-op garden. After the 6 o'clock meeting, I guess someone else on the board called Sonia to let her know that she was going to be removed from the HOA president's seat due to the unapproved expenses, towing issue, and more. Around 8 p.m., I heard screaming outside, blood-curdling female screams of "Help! Call the police." It was Zelda standing outside her condo, completely freaking out. Apparently, Sonia came over, punched the 70-year-old Zelda in the face, pulled her out of her own home, locked her out, and then started threatening to harm her disabled and bedridden elderly husband who was upstairs. Zelda was hysterical while I was on the phone with the police, as were 5 neighbors also standing outside. Zelda was screaming every curse word in the book through her own front door at our crazy ex-HOA president. Sonia was arrested that night for some crazy stuff like assault and holding someone hostage. Since Sonia was a single parent, her kids were taken away by relatives about an hour after Child Protective Services showed up. Zelda was left with a gnarly black eye and huge scratches on her chest where Sonia had clawed her shirt and pulled her into the haymaker. I only lived there 14 months and eventually moved due to the escalating issues with the HOA. It was quite an ordeal. Next one is titled, "They Were Just Trying to Keep Their Son Safe." My parents live in a neighborhood with several of the local physicians. One of them has like 6 kids, and the youngest has severe autism and is nonverbal. He's about 5 or 6 years old, and he loves riding his little tricycle in their driveway, which is pretty large, and would do it for hours. His mom stayed home with him for the most part, and she and her husband became concerned that he'd drive into the road in a moment if they happened to look away. To deal with that potential issue, they got some orange construction netting that they just put across the end of the driveway while he was out there, and then take it down when they went back inside. I always thought that net was a good idea to keep him safe. However, Several of the families in the neighborhood were not pleased with the net and said it was an eyesore. So a homeowners association meeting was called. The meeting quickly turned into attacks on how the couple were taking care of their son and how it made the neighborhood look ignorant to have the netting up. Needless to say, no one offered any other options, and the family was so irate that they packed up and moved within a month. That happened about 3 to 4 years ago, and the house still hasn't sold. Now they live out in the country somewhere, and last time I talked to the dad, he said that the son is doing very well in their new home and still rides his bike for hours on end. Next one is titled, The Stocky HOA President. During my high school years, my parents divorced, and my mom moved across the country. Being in boarding school during the term anyway, I went with her and lived with her during school times and visited my dad during the holidays. At first, we stayed with my aunt, but soon my mom and her boyfriend wanted their own space. I went to a private school, so we moved close enough for me to walk to school in the morning, not common in my country due to unsafe roads. We knew no one aside from my aunt. We actually made up people just to get a library card. Our new neighborhood was run by an HOA, and the president was some old guy who had retired and had nothing better to do at the time. For some reason, he chose us to harass. For example, several people had pets in the complex. Our lease agreement specifically stated that pets were permitted. At the time, I had my dog. I suffer from depression and anxiety, and my dog really helped with that, but she wasn't registered as any emotional support. We were given several fines for having the dog, claiming that tenants weren't allowed pets. He did not own the house. We also had our old cat, who we adopted from a family with too many cats. He was old and pretty much slept all the time. The HOA president threatened to take us to court over the animals. He had pictures, but we had no front garden. All the pictures he took were through our windows. This was especially distressing as my room had the main window out onto the street. This creepy old duck had a lens that could zoom right into my bedroom window. Eventually, the dog went to live with my aunt because we were all so tired of fighting every time I took her for a walk. The cat stayed. Later, we got another cat that my boyfriend and I had found abandoned. Cue more threatening notes from old guy. I started babysitting for one of the neighbors, and even they said that he was overbearing and creepy even though they own the house. My mom's boyfriend's daughter is a lawyer and thoroughly examined our lease and the HOA paperwork. We broke no rules. Our garden was neat and looked good. Our bins were taken in one time. The only thing he took offense to was a teenager's only friend and a geriatric cat. We moved as soon as I finished high school. Sorry for the long post, but I just needed to vent about the old duck that has made me terrified to move to a place that has an HOA. I understand wanting one to make sure people's gardens are neat and so on, but too many presidents go on a massive power trip. A user in the comments said, while HOAs have a ton of legal leeway, it's still illegal to take pictures of the inside of a minor's bedroom. Even looking through a camera is pretty sketch. A quick call to the police station about an old fart might have solved it or made it a lot worse because, oh, he's just an old man, he doesn't mean any harm often happens. You handled it as well as you could have. Next one is titled, His Mom Took These Fools to School. I grew up in a military family, so we moved around every 4 years and lived primarily on base housing until we relocated from Georgia to Michigan, where we moved into a nice subdivision. The subdivision had a lake with some of the houses backing up to it. The homeowners association for the subdivision had a clear agenda of creating a park-like atmosphere around the lake and had recently begun implementing decisions based on aesthetics and some new bylaws they'd enacted. The problem was the bylaws affected my parents' plan to put in a fence and pool in their backyard. The bigger problem was the HOA enacted the bylaws incorrectly and never recorded them. Little did they know that, after finishing the military, my mom had gone on to become a teacher and then later got her law degree. When they posted a cease and desist notice for our backyard renovations, my mom called bullcrap. When they declared they would tear down our fence, my dad's response was, I'd like to see them freaking try. The HOA was simply being implacable. In Michigan, you have to have a fence if you want a pool. It's a safety/liability thing. However, the people with lake houses didn't want fences and thought they were offensive to see and against their park aesthetic. Even after my parents offered to put a really nice fence up, not some lame chain link thing, they still said no. Other people had similar issues with the HOA, offering many solutions only to be denied. It was clear the power-tripping group just didn't want fences and thought they had the power to decide. It got so bad that another homeowner lost a sale of their house because a new buyer with small children couldn't get approval for any kind of fence in their wooded lot. After hearing others' horror stories and seeing the pushback from the HOA, my parents decided on the nuclear approach and implemented it. Construction on an expensive white vinyl fence began, finished, and the pool equipment was on the way when we received the stop order notice. Then I got to witness something that still brings a tear to my eye. See, these turds had been puffing themselves up for months over the fence, and they even went and hired an attorney to put a stop to it. This attorney invited everyone to a sit-down meeting. This meeting wasn't just in someone's living room. No, they rented out an entire boardroom at a local eatery. My dad said he didn't want anything to do with it, knowing his temper problem and 12 gauge, which he casually referred to as his Southern hospitality, would not be welcome, and asked that I go with Mom to provide backup. Not realizing what I was about to witness, I blithely agreed and showed up in my polo and cargo pants while everyone else was in suits and ties. This board of old ticked-off dudes was sitting there waiting for us when we arrived. We sat down and they started talking about costs and how they had to hire a lawyer that we'd have to pay for since we created the problem. Then my mom cut them off. "What makes you think you have any legal right to impose this rule?" she asked. They all turned to their attorney who said, Miss, ma'am, we had a vote." Then my mom did it. She took out the recorded bylaws, flopped them onto the table and said, "Really? It's not in here." Cue awkward moment of silence. Papers rifled through, stammering. My mom, seeing the opportunity, continued, "See, what I think happened is you had a vote, but it was wrong. These bylaws require a majority of the lots to vote in favor of a change to be made. You had a majority of the votes cast, not a majority of the total lots. So what you really had was a plurality, and that vote never passed. You can see the rules for voting here," points out Paige, "and you can see that the rule was never changed in the official bylaws either, probably because it never passed. And now none of you have bothered to even read or follow the bylaws, and you're trying to impose them on me. Well, I can tell you that's not going to happen. Thank you, gentlemen. I will not be paying a dime for any of this or your attorney. Have a good day." Then she got up, looked at me to follow her, and marched out. They actually had the gall to try to hand her an invoice for the lawyer as she walked out, and she just waved it off. That was the day I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. Serving fools like that, my mom showed me what it was to stand up to those who had let power go to their head. Last one is titled, HOA Fired Me Because of Association. For almost 8 years, I've worked for my HOA on a small job around the neighborhood. It takes no more than an hour of work a week, and I got enough pay to consider it fun money, while I saved for my actual job. Well, yesterday I got a call from my brother asking me where my supplies were because someone was there to pick them up. I was confused because my manager never told me anything and asked, "What do you mean?" It got quiet on the phone and my brother responds, "Apparently, he is doing your job now. 8 years, and they didn't even tell me they let me go." The manager that hired me was brought to question on some things, and as a result, me and anyone he hired was let go. This happened 2 weeks ago, and I'm just now finding out. No one bothered to call anyone he hired, they just waited for them to find out. I'm sending an invoice to them now because I sure as hell didn't work for free in the time they neglected to tell me. The excuse they gave me was that they were changing how they distributed the work and to not take it personally, and that my manager is just out. I don't care about losing the job, it's a dime a dozen. But 8 years, and this is how it ends. Not only that, I found out the job is probably going to go to the son of a board member. I'm hurt over that because when my mom was on the board, members raised a stink because she would be able to dictate my pay. She rustled feathers on a completely different thing, and they did everything they could to push her out since. She stepped down so I could keep my job. And you can bet I will be at every meeting if that guy gets hired. Up the HOA. Thanks for listening.